Mumazine.
I'm delighted to be here with the lovely Annabel Karmel. Shall I call you the Queen of Ween?
I've been called the Princess of Purees before.
That's a good one.
It's quite funny, so when I invite people for dinner, I'm always a bit worried that I might be giving them mushy peas and carrots for their dinner. And other people say to me they use a complete baby toddler meal plan to cook for their dinner parties, so it can work both ways.
Tell us a little bit about how you kind of started what is now a huge empire.
Yeah, well, it wasn't planned. I was actually trained to be a musician, and I was a musician for many years. And then I got married, and I guess, you know, as every woman does, I really wanted to have a child. It took me a long time to get pregnant, well over 2 years. And my pregnancy was a good pregnancy, and I gave birth to a little girl called Natasha. And she was born healthy and everything was fine until one day when she's about 3 months old, and I went into her room, and you have that sort of instinct as a mother, things aren't quite right. And I called a doctor, and it was towards evening, and he was very reluctant to see her, but eventually I persuaded him I was going to bring her. And he just gave me this long lecture about how children were much less vulnerable than first-time mothers imagined, and she was fine. And I felt a bit uneasy, but I went to bed, and that morning I got up, and she'd looked worse to me. I took her to see another doctor, but I was on his doorstep before 9 o'clock. And he examined her, and then he said, well, I've got to go and see another patient, which I thought was quite odd, and he left for about 10 minutes. When he came back, he said, I think you better sit down, I've got some bad news. And he said to me that I think there's something wrong with her brain, and I think there's something seriously wrong with her, and you have to take her to hospital. And I did. I took her to St Mary's, and they did lots of tests on her. It wasn't until about 5 o'clock after they did a CAT scan that they sat me down in this room, and in a very matter-of-fact way, they just said to me that she'd never be normal again, or she might die, and that they had to transfer her to Great Ormond Street Hospital. And she was there for 5 days and 5 nights, and eventually she died in my arms. It was horrific. It was like so not normal to lose a child, and it's like something that he used to say worst nightmare. I used to wake up thinking it was a bad dream and it wasn't real. So that changed my life. And sort of from that day on, I couldn't really play very much. I just didn't have the heart to do it, and I really wanted to work with children. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew that my life was somehow inextricably kind of tied to improving children's lives and to make some meaning of Natasha's death. And I was very lucky, well, not just lucky, I actually took a fertility drug called Clomid to help me get pregnant, because I was worried it would take me another 2 years, and it was just such a terrible time, and I knew that getting pregnant was so important for me to come to terms with Natasha's death. And I was lucky that I did get pregnant within about 4 or 5 months. But unfortunately, although my pregnancy was very good, the birth was pretty terrible, because when I went into labour and I called my doctor, he told me not to go to hospital. And I took his advice, and I called him up a little bit later, about half an hour later, and couldn't get hold of him, but eventually got hold of him in a restaurant and asked him where he'd be, and he said he'd be around and I could call him any time. And about half an hour after that, I went upstairs and my waters broke, and we couldn't get hold of him at all, and to cut a long story short, I ended up giving birth on the staircase. So it was pretty horrific. It was Nicholas, my second child, that was the catalyst to my career. It was a combination of losing a child and this child who wouldn't eat. And I felt so vulnerable. I was a mum who'd lost a child, and with a child who wouldn't eat. I really wanted to make sure that he had a reserve to fight whatever would happen to him, because whatever happened to Natasha, you know, was so serious that she couldn't fight. And I breastfed, but I wanted to feed him the best possible way. And he was a terrible eater. He just wouldn't eat any jarred baby food. And there were no books on feeding babies that were decent. I mean, everything tasted horrible. It was like put a piece of liver in milk, poach it, and puree it. It was horrible. And I thought, well, babies should have good quality food and it should taste good. And I started to make up recipes for Nicholas, and he started to eat things that he wouldn't eat before. And at that time I was running a big play group. I live in St John's Wood. It was called Babes in the Wood. And I had quite a big circle of friends, and then I asked them to invite their friends. So on the first day there were like 100 mothers with babies. And of course you think as a mother that you're very isolated, you're the only one who has a child who won't eat. But then talking to the other mothers, I found they also had children who wouldn't eat. And I was just thinking, well, I'll hand out my recipes to them and see if that will help. So every week I bring some recipes, and every week they say, what else have you got? And eventually they said to me, you know, these recipes are so good. Our children love them, you should write a book. And I thought, I can't write a book. You know, what qualifications do I have to write a book? But then I thought, what a wonderful legacy to Natasha, to write a book that would help children be fed in the right way, could have cut through all the myths that people believed were, you know, couldn't give certain things to babies, when in fact they could. And I spent 2.5 years researching child nutrition and making up recipes and writing a book. And that was a complete baby and toddler meal planner. I didn't have a publisher, it was totally speculative, but I put my heart and soul into it, and I really cared about it. And I went on to have 2 more children, and I was surrounded by babies, and it was my whole life. And I also thought that I wanted to be a good mum, and I wanted to be at home, and writing was something that I could do and combine with being a mum. And I had no idea it would be as successful as it was, and in fact it was really hard to find a publisher. I sent it to all the big publishers and they all turned it down. It was only because the book packager took it to Frankfurt and Simon Schuster bought it that it eventually got published by Random House.
Wow. God, amazing story.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So for all those mums out there that have kind of got their own little kind of businesses that are starting out and thinking, oh no, maybe I should give up.
It's true.
Keep going.
I could so easily have given up, and I thought I'd spent 2.5 years writing something that no one wanted. And it was very dispiriting. But you know, if you really believe in something, I believe that you can do it. And you as a mum know if it's the right thing to do. And also a mum's instinct. You know, I learnt that mum's instinct was the best thing to go by, and don't listen to somebody who say your child's not well. You must go with what you feel. Anyway, so Nicholas grew up and he started to eat most things. Now he's 23 years old and an amazing eater and so not fussy. And I put it down to the fact that he had so many different foods when he was young. And the Complete Very Toddler Meal Planner, and now it's sold 4 million copies. So I had no literary agent and no publisher. I went on to write 26 books on feeding children. But I love it. I love developing recipes, I love working with children. And I think it's not like work because it's my hobby, it's my dream. I'm very lucky that I've got all the opportunities that I have.